Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to wherever you are in the world there, Aloha Nation, and welcome to our breakout session where we're going to talk about performance and retention through strong positive culture. And thank you a ton for joining me in this exploration that we're going to do today. It's going to work a little weird. Normally, I like to have these types of venues live and we can explore this in the room together and we can actually talk about the ideas and the effort that it takes to be able to build strong and positive cultures. But what we've got is a virtual platform that's been very professionally taken care of for us. And there's a link from the page that you're on that has to go through some folks that are helping out to be able to get to me in order for me to be able to see your questions, your responses, and things along those lines. And I do want to try to make this as much of a dialogue as we possibly can, because by no means do I know everything about how to be able to do this. Ultimately, we together are going to be able to figure out how to be able to build the strong, positive cultures that we want across the organizations that we're responsible for leading. And what we're going to explore today is we're going to take some time to be able to go through this little forest and find our way through to understand what does it mean to be able to understand, to recognize, to sense, and then to be able to respond to the type of culture that is in an organization and how to improve it towards one that is improving the performance of that organization and the interest and engagement of the people within that organization, and create an atmosphere that drives the type of place that people want to stay, they want to be a part of. What we're going to talk a little bit about today is where we currently are with regard to our sustainment enterprise, with regard to risk. We're going to talk about the current platforms that we have, the concerns that we've got with regard to how to take care of our weapon systems, how those things interlock with each other. And then we're going to talk about the people that we have in our teams and where our risk is right now with regard to people. And then after that, we're going to start turning this into a culture discussion. So after we've talked about why a strong positive culture is so important, we're going to dig into what it looks like. I'm interested in your thoughts. I'm interested in your experiences also, because ultimately together what you're going to see is that the largest opportunities that are out there, the greatest things that are going on out there to invest in our airmen, to take care of them, are ultimately coming from you. They're coming from the units. And this is one opportunity that we have to be able to share some of those experiences, to share some of what those best practices are, as we all try to refine our teams and make them stronger. So as we go into these slides here, the slides are built in kind of a normal standard format, and we're just going to kind of walk through them. But I want you to use the information that's on these slides as a spark to start part of this conversation. And then we're gonna see how Andrew's able to keep up with capturing your notes. I want you to type into the chat the things that you're thinking, the things that are coming to your mind, and then she's gonna relate them to me. And that way we can constantly have a dialogue as we walk through this. So I've had an opportunity here at this LOA to be able to be a part of a couple of different sessions. And one of the sessions I was a part of on Tuesday during LOA University was the CFM panel. And during the career field functional manager panel that we had, I had an opportunity to be able to answer part of a question from someone about what risks do we see out there that are coming at us from those peer competitors that we're going to be up against, and what are we doing to be able to protect ourselves against those risks? Well, I would offer that part of the answer to that question was every single one of us that's working in a sustainment enterprise is experiencing and is going through an environment where you're operating in these different electronic systems. You're working on the different weapon systems that we have. And what we asked during that session was, as you consider the things that you're working on and how those things, those weapon systems or the information systems that you're using could potentially be used against us, you're going to come up with the solutions before we are. You're going to see the risks before we are on the staffs at anywhere. So really, it's from you that we have an opportunity to be able to see and sense that risk and to be able to respond to it. But that won't happen if we have negative cultures. A negative culture would block people from wanting to have a voice. positive culture is one where people are going to get engaged. They're going to approach each other about these ideas. They're going to want to be more innovative. They're going to want to be more engaged. They're going to want to take care of each other. And that's what this is all about. So that's what we're going to explore here today. And I'm looking forward to your comments as we continue to go through this presentation today. And I'm going to start us off. I'm going to quick right past that bluff slide, and you'll have an opportunity to be able to take a look at it later if you'd like. But I'm going to start us off by walking straight into something that just came out in a paper that the Air Force A4 just presented. And this is an enterprise view of compounding risks in sustainment. So when I talk about why positive cultures are so important from a performance perspective, we have a huge challenge in front of us, and you all know it. In every aspect of the LOA environment that you personally work in, you recognize that there are compounding risks. The way that we described it in this paper was to talk about the aging aircraft fleet that we have as just one element. That aging aircraft fleet has enormous pressures against a system that's trying to figure out, how do I sustain and modernize these weapon systems? And it becomes more and more expensive to be able to do it. While at the same time, simultaneously, we've got a constrained budgetary situation that we always have. There's never been a year that there's never been a constrained budget of some type. But the constraints that we have now and the small amount of growth that we do have now are not able to keep up with the growth of the requirement of that aging fleet as we need to sustain and modernize it. That's a huge challenge for all of us to be able to figure out, how do we sustain these weapon systems? Another element of this is the people, the maintenance workforce that we have. And I'm going to talk specifically about the aircraft maintenance workforce. And I'm going to ask you to give me that indulgence, because that's my area of expertise. That's where I am. But in full recognition, this is a workforce of the entire sustainment enterprise at our depots, on our flight lines, our entire logistics and supply chain communities, our international partners, even our partners within industry, and how all of us work together to be able to accomplish this. What I'm going to show you here is some of the risks that we're facing with that. What I offer to you is that a strong, positive culture within an organization, that is the responsibility of the leadership of that organization to be able to perpetuate, gives us the opportunity to be able to work into that maintenance workforce area, into that workforce area for all of our logistics communities, to be able to make us a stronger organization, to be able to try to work against these compounding sustainment risks that we have, to be able to sustain the weapon systems, to achieve the operational requirements that we have. And that's really the ultimate goal. And the leadership influence against that culture is what's going to help us mitigate it. It's going to help us mediate this and be able to accomplish our mission generation. So, leadership responsibilities for culture. Okay, so let's talk about this challenge just a little bit more. Within the performance aspect of this, we have got to figure out how we're going to sustain our weapon systems. I just talked about how all those compounding issues wind up hitting each other. So then as we move on from those compounding issues, I'm going to dial in specifically to one area in particular, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the career field health within, like I said, the maintenance community in particular, so that we can talk about where some of these risks are starting to manifest. So the reason why strong positive cultures are so important from a retention perspective is because of the current career field health that we have. Now, if you've been a part of any of the career field chats that we've done, the fireside chats that we've done, and our other career field discussions that we've had, you've probably seen a version of this slide. And what's important to understand is we've got a particular area of our career field within particular year groups at the lieutenant colonel level that we're short on the actual population of people that we need against the requirement that we have. And that's the case for all of our career fields out there. This harks back to around the 2007 to 2010 timeframe, where all of our communities were going through force management decisions that were being made corporate-wide, that had to be made, we had to figure out what was the best way to be able to have the Air Force that we could afford, that we needed to have. Since then, there's been even increased growth in unfunded requirements, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. Another reason why it is so important that we retain the population that we actually have. So right now, what we're experiencing from an officer standpoint, or from a commander standpoint, is a situation where we have younger and younger officers that are taking over command opportunities for us. Really important then that we make sure that we invest in their development, your development, to ensure that you're capable of performing those leadership roles that you have a responsibility for as a part of this. You can see on this slide just how much some of that risk is. You can see where the current squadron commander stats, the number of spaces that we have that are majors positions versus lieutenant colonel's positions, and it's the complete flip-flop as the people that we actually have in those jobs right now. That's putting a lot of pressure on people that have not necessarily had enough time to be able to develop. So we're expecting a lot of you to be able to develop even faster than what we should have been able to offer you. That's okay. I believe you're up to that challenge. I also think that's okay because of the work that's going on across our different schools, our opportunities for training and education that we have out there to be able to change the way that we develop our leadership competencies, particularly to look at this area of strong positive cultures. So then we expand this into the enlisted side, and this is a crazy busy chart. There's a lot of information on here, and if you're looking at this at your phone right now, you're going, what in the world is Maxwell showing to me? That's okay. So the other part of the retention why, again, within the maintenance portfolio, we're going to talk about what we have going on here. So we have, and I'll even try to show a little mouse here so that way you can see what's going on. So you've got across all, we're going to look at this top left area, our entire enlisted force doing aircraft maintenance, active duty doing aircraft maintenance. And you can see the years of service across the bottom here. And you can see over the last 5 years that we've been working on over assessing to be able to recover that maintenance gap. You probably recall that from years gone by, a couple of years ago at AFA. In fact, the secretary said we've closed the maintenance gap. We've got those maintainers that we need out there. And that's true. We do. If you look at the current manning numbers, we're at 100%. But you can also see the experience level of those people are quite young. So then you come over here to the right-hand side and you can see how that breaks down. And if you can see these circles underneath that breakdown of the current manning and activities, you can see that in fiscal year 2000, less than half of our community had less than 5 years of experience. 2010, just under half at 47% had under 5 years of experience. And now in 2020, 54% of our maintenance community have under 5 years of experience. The preponderance of our maintainers that are out there doing the work. Okay, that's all right. I trust them. We've trained them. We've done a really good job of developing them to understand what it means to be able to do this really important, this critical role that we have. We've taught them that this is a dangerous profession, even when you do everything right. So they know that. But their lack of experience shows up in this experience gap that we have between that 7 and 15 years. So we have got to figure out how to design, how to create environments where people want to stay. We can do this for performance. Yes, we can. We can do a lot of things for performance. But if we don't do it in a way that's positive for those airmen that are a part of it, you're not going to choose to stay when given the opportunity to be able to depart. Our goal in this effort to be able to develop the ability to sense and respond to the type of cultures that we've created in organizations is it's not so different than what you just heard Dr. McCauley talking about if you were in her session. In her session, she talked very specifically about the individual, about you. In this session, we're talking about how you talk about your team, how you provide them that environment to be able to get engaged, to be able to want to be involved, to continue to want to be a part of the organization as it continues to perform its roles. The other part of the risk that we have with regard to the retention aspect of this is the growth in unfunded requirements that we have. This manifests itself mostly in the aircraft maintenance community. This exists across all of our different communities across the sustainment enterprise though. So each one of you probably has seen a similar type of growth. In our particular case, if you look down here at this bottom left-hand chart, is one way to show it. You can see the total number of unfunded requirements that we had as each year went by. Then we are currently at the highest level of unfunded positions versus the requirement that we have in over 20 years. The combination of that and that least experienced force that we've also had in that period of time offers a lot of risk, which is why it's so important that we train those maintainers that are coming in and we give them an environment that helps them to learn, that helps them to understand that they do in fact belong to this organization and that they choose to stay. So that's the why. So as we get into this next part of this, I want you to start to give me some of your thoughts. I want you to type directly into the chat some of the thoughts that you have and questions that you have as we continue to go along this session. And then those will get translated over to me, and then I'm happy to be able to reply back to you. So next, we're going to talk about, all right, why then would we wind up losing people? Okay, we've got a retention challenge. We want to keep people. Positive cultures sound like a way maybe to do that. But why is it, in fact, that we're actually losing people across the community right now? Well, let's talk about that. Over the years of 2017 and 2019, and every odd year, A1 does a retention survey. This is the result of that retention survey. In 2017, and then in 2019, for both the enlisted side as well as the officer side. And we're looking forward to 2021's version of this same exact survey to wind up coming out. What's highlighted in red is everything that an individual experiences in their day-to-day environment. Not so different than what Dr. McCauley talked about, that environment that is challenging you every single day. What I would offer is that those things that are highlighted in red are those opportunities that we have to be able to influence with regard to strong positive cultures. So let me take a pause on that for one quick second, and let's talk about what that means. First, a strong culture. Strong versus weak in this regard is going to be defined as a culture that helps influence behavior. A weak culture would not influence your behavior. Okay, sure, there's a culture of this environment. This is kind of how we do things around here, but I do my own thing anyway. That would be a weak culture. A strong culture is one that pulls you towards it, that gets you to behave in a particular way based on the expectations of that organization, that environment, that team that you're a part of. So building strong culture is a part of this. You can also then have both strong and weak, positive or negative cultures. A positive culture is one that would be healthy. A negative culture is one that a lot of times we throw around a very abstract word, and that's toxic. There are very significant differences between those two things. And I would offer that the retention survey shows that a lot of those elements start to stand out as the reasons that people would be interested in departing. So these are the reasons that we're up against when it comes to trying to retain people, is to find ways to be able to reduce that job stress, increase that overall job satisfaction, helping them maintain a work-life balance. And that's an interesting topic. And work-life balance is not necessarily more time away from the job. I would offer that my interpretation of work-life balance is an understanding and a commitment to yourself that you have in fact balanced your priorities with the priorities of those parts of your life that you're engaged with, be it work, be it family, be it your own personal resiliency and growth. Those things have to exist in balance. And maintaining that does not necessarily mean not being at work all the time. And I think that that's a really important aspect of this. In fact, part of a strong positive culture would be one that actually invites more engagement. It gets me to want to be a part of the organization, not because I feel like I have to, not because I'm afraid that if I'm not, I'm going to get kicked out, but one that I want to get engaged with because I understand what we're doing together. And I understand the purpose of what it is that we're achieving. We have a vision for where we're trying to go, a just cause that we're trying to support. Those are aspects of a strong positive culture that we're talking about here that could target and look at each one of these different areas for our enlisted and our officer teams. Those areas that are highlighted in orange are kind of the way that people express how they explain why they feel those things. They feel job stress because they don't have adequate people in the workplace. They feel job stress because of leadership. Okay? So how do we resolve this? The most important aspect of this as we start to transition to what positive and negative cultures are all about is to be able to find a way to be able to sense the environment that you're in. And that's what I want to start to explore next. So what are the differences between positive and negative cultures? And this is where I'm really looking for your thoughts on this, and the elements of putting things into the chat of the things that you can think about. These are sparks. I'm throwing them out there to see what winds up catching, to see where your interests lie. But some of the positive culture aspects would be things like long-term performance, enriched morale, increased engagement, a place where people want to get involved in the aspect of what their roles and what their job is and what their organization is ultimately performing. So I did have a couple of chat things pop up, and I'm going to stop to take a look at those and bring those into the conversation. So what are your thoughts on conforming versus assimilation? It's an interesting question. Okay. I would say that the two would be defined differently by what you are choosing to do with your own identity. I would say that conforming would probably be defined closer to, I am not changing my own identity, but I am going to go ahead and fall into line with what this organization expects of me. Assimilation, I would offer, is trying to shift your own version of your identity with regard to your values to be able to try to match the organizational values. I don't know that either one of those is necessarily better or worse. It's not something I've truly looked into, but that is an interesting question with regard to how far are you willing to go, even to change your own identity to be a part of the organization that you're a part of. I think that honestly, being willing to change your own identity because you see something really positive about this organization that you're a part of could be very healthy. And I think that's an important thing for each of us to be able to explore. So let's see, I got another question that popped up here. Do you believe that multi-capable airman concept will compound the retention issue or help? It's another really good question. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing with regard to the ideas of multi-capable airmen. Is we're looking at those core foundational functional roles and responsibilities that people have, and understanding what do you do as a maintainer? What do you do as a logie? What are your roles and responsibility as a munitions maintainer? And then how could that potentially be explored to be changed, to be modified, to give you more skill sets, to make you even more capable in an environment? Okay, we can do that. I would offer that we can only do that probably to a certain extent, because the human condition is not one that we can just continue to plug more and more competencies in and still retain the high level of quality that we expect out of those competencies. It takes a lot to remain proficient on things, especially the skills that we use. So there's a challenge there as between the career field managers and in the field, the work that you all are doing and the things that we're figuring out with regard to the experiments that are going on, I think will help us to understand how does that create risk with regard to retention. When are we asking too much of people, going right back to an environment where potentially we are in fact creating that stress versus creating a positive culture that's helping people to get engaged to be able to help take care of each other? I think that that's an important thing for us to make sure that we continue to recognize as well. Another question, sir, do you know if the retention rates and challenges are more pronounced in maintenance as opposed to other AFSC users in an issue that can be seen across the whole Air Force? These are issues that can be seen across the Air Force with regard to the causal factors in here that were in that retention survey. One of the things that we were recently asked to do was to create an aircraft maintenance retention strategy, because we had just brought all these people in and we don't have a strategy with regard to retention. So we did, and the CFMs spent a lot of time trying to understand what does it mean to retain the right number that we need to retain, because we can't retain everybody throughout an entire 20-year career. We don't have the end strength to do that. But how do you make sure that you retain what you do need with regard to the level of number of people that you have? And I think that what that has shown us is that through that retention strategy, it's given us an idea of, okay, this is what we look like as a maintenance community. This is what we have to do. In that exploration, when we did the pullback of the retention rates of aircraft maintenance versus other communities, pretty much right on line with the entire rest of the Air Force, or better, in fact, than a lot of communities out there. It was kind of a surprise to some of us, in fact, which I think goes a lot to the cultures that people do build out there, and the strong positive cultures that do exist in the organizations that find that people find a level of purpose, a level of identity with themselves and the organization that they're a part of that is so strong they do want to stay. So in a lot of our career fields, our retention is actually, in fact, better than a lot of the Air Force as a whole, which is pretty cool. So with regard to the differences, to get back to the slides here, with regard to the differences between positive cultures, negative cultures, I'd love for you all to throw into the chat experiences that you've had in places that have shown you positive cultures and negative cultures, and then we'll try to copy those in and get them over to me so that way we can kind of bring them up. But those positive cultures are the ones that we, in fact, are asking for throughout this entire ALOA event that we've been doing this week. If you had the opportunity to be able to listen in to General Barry's session, to the Chief of Staff's session, and a number of other of our senior leaders that have talked about the change that we want to see, the reimagining of ideas that we have that we currently utilize to be able to do sustainment, the challenges that we have with regard to our weapon systems and wanting to do things in a different way. General Brown's accelerate, change, or lose. Those things will only happen in an environment where people are choosing to be engaged and choosing to be a part of what is going on. An organization where people know they are safe to be able to allow their voice to come out when they see something. How comfortable are you in your environment being able to admit to a mistake? That could be a powerful question if you really sit back and think about it. It tells you a lot about the organization that you're a part of. How comfortable are the people that work for you willing to be to come to you and tell you about something that's gone wrong? I think that's an important measure of the climate that you've created as a leader. These are where these things interact with our people. The increased engagement, the decreased turnover, people want to remain a part of that particular type of team. The type of feedback that can happen, candid, constructive feedback, that can be such a powerful thing, because now you're able to very quickly, very simply have conversations with people to be able to correct behavior, to be able to modify things, to be able to identify a mistake in a constructive manner. That is completely the opposite of being destructive with regard to the blame of the individual and a call out of that individual as not being good enough. Okay? Maybe there's some development we need in that person. Maybe that person is not cut out for that particular role. That doesn't mean the person's not good. The way that you present that constructive feedback versus potentially destructive or guarded feedback or no feedback at all would be differences in what a positive culture versus a negative culture winds up looking like. Conflict management. We constantly have to deal with conflict management. It's one of those areas that I found after doing this for all this time that I had been doing conflict management in my career the entire time I've been an aircraft maintenance officer. And what I mean by conflict management is the interaction of interfering interests. Not this person doesn't like that person. That's interpersonal conflict. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about intra-organizational conflict. Think ops maintenance. Think logistics versus security sometimes. We need augmentees out here on the flight line to do things for us. And everybody in the logistics community is going, not me, because while you're needing augmentees, I'm needing to set up a deployment line. Those types of balancing of conflict that occur and balancing of those interacting, interfering interests. How does your team handle that? Does your team handle that in a collaborative way? Do they start to work together and cooperate on solutions and find ways to be able to express perspective between the different interests that we have so that we can find a solution that doesn't just solve one problem, but is in fact a win-win? Or is it purely competitive intra-organizationally? Let's just talk about the division of resources. If then the division of resources within an organization, you're talking competitively to be able to resolve that conflict versus collaborating on the best possible solution for the higher level organization, that could be a sign of the different types of cultures that you're creating in that organization. If you want the innovation that we are demanding, and each one of you is asking for here during this LOA event this week, You need to create the types of cultures that people are going to be willing to step up and try and fail and know that that's okay. Working together as a team are the ways that we're going to wind up being able to accomplish this. My original opening comment when I opened up was about the question that we had during the CFM chat was about what are the risks that are out there and how are we getting after them? And my answer was, I know that our people are seeing things that are potentially risky all the time, but they have got to know that they still have a voice. They have got to be able to be prepared and be capable of having that voice and expressing it and know that it's okay to do so, because in doing that, it makes us stronger. Versus organizations that are stifling that type of innovation, that are not allowing things to change. It's interesting, we use the term frozen middle a lot. As a matter of fact, General Brown even used it during one of the questions, or his answers to one of his questions that he had this week. And there could be all sorts of different reasons for a slowing of innovation that occurs throughout an organization. And some of it, I would offer that chances are most of them are not necessarily bad reasons. We are doing things the way we are doing them because of a lot of hard lessons along the way too. That makes sense. But being willing to be able to explore those new ideas, that's important. Being able to have the communication flow across an organization to be able to move those type of innovative ideas around, that is a sign of positive culture. And enlightened risk taking versus being completely risk averse or being risk foolish. Enlightened risk taking would mean understanding the potential risks to this thing that we're getting ready to accomplish, ensuring that those risks are being accepted at the right level, and then being able to move out on it and try. One of the things that we're working on as a part of all of these future employment operational philosophies that we're working on between ACE and dynamic force employment is recognition of policy not as a boundary, but as the supporting tool that people have to be able to recognize how would this person probably act in that environment. Well, we have policy for that. The most simple, very basic form of the rule allows me to understand what it is that you're doing. Okay. Finding ways to be able to remove those barriers is one of the things that we're working on. Policy busting is what we're calling it in the A4LM division, where we're taking a look at that and trying not to be risk averse or risk foolish, but being enlightened on the way that we're actually accepting that risk across our communities. The positive cultures that you can create out there will improve performance and ultimately help us retain people to be able to fill that experience gap that we have across our communities. Finally, the call to action. And a couple of questions have come up, and I'm going to leave this slide up, and this is where I really want more of your interest and more of your chat comments, because the cool thing about this slide is just about everything that you see on the right-hand side, those success stories, have very little to nothing to do with what's coming down from headquarters, what's coming out of the staffs to be able to execute these things. These are ideas that are coming from you. This is the opportunity. LOA is the opportunity to be able to connect, to network, to share those ideas so that way we can move these things across the Air Force. Internally, and the folks out at Kadena did that for themselves and found ways to be able to create white space. You could do all sorts of things with that white space. A connection of that to something like Airmen for Life that was created out at Aviano, that's powerful. Now you're investing back in those airmen, and they know it. And as you feel invested in, you're more likely to invest in that team that's taking care of you. Those are the links that we're looking for here today. I want you to put into the chat the ideas that you have experienced at your bases, at your locations that are looking at investing in positive cultures, investing in the airmen that you have. And we're going to do our very best to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be able to share and see those things too. What we are working on at the headquarters level and across all our entire force development community the education locations that we've got, the training locations that we've got, and the experiential opportunities that we have that we pull out of our AFPC team, and where AFPC works to be able to assign people to particular places to give them the experience of learning how to take care of people better and how to be able to develop their leadership. We're focusing on teaching people how to sense and respond to that organizational culture. So now they can shift that culture towards one that's positive, one that's going to be more inclusive, one that's going to be more engaging, one that's going to be more innovative, and is going to create that environment that people want to remain a part of. So how do you do this? Well, within your organizations, you have got to prioritize psychological safety. You have to prioritize the knowledge that it is okay for me to, first of all, be human and err. Okay? I know that the rest of this team has my back if that happens and will watch out for me and will cover for me. Because like I said before, this is a dangerous profession even when you do everything right. And none of us are perfect. So I have to be able to count on the people that are on my left and on my right to be able to ensure that I get this done right. Prioritizing psychological safety is so incredibly important because, as you heard Dr. McCulley talk about earlier today, there's nothing the mind does more than scan for danger. Nothing. All of these higher level thoughts, all of these innovative ideas, all of these experiments, the things that we're working on, the schooling that you may do, the things that you're passionate about, the fun that you go have, your mind doesn't think about those things anywhere near as much as it thinks about keeping you safe, protecting you, protecting your loved ones. It constantly is scanning for those dangers, and it recognizes the dangers in an organization just the same exact way it would recognize a threat to physical life. That's why we use the term toxic. It's an abstract term, and it makes it really difficult to be able to respond to a negative culture then if you just call it toxic. You've got to pull back the details of what that means. And in most cases, it winds up creating an environment that is no longer psychologically safe for the people that are in it. The human brain manifests that. It experiences that as physical threat to life. The term toxic is pretty relevant in that case. You could trace that back to the very chemicals that are in the mind, that are in the body, and how we respond. You heard a little bit about that from Dr. McCulley, and you heard from her what that means for you as an individual, what ideas you can put in as an individual to be able to take care of you. This, today, now, you and me. This is about what we do for our teams, to create an environment that is psychologically safe, that does allow us the opportunity to be able to speak up, to have a voice, to ensure that the entire team is doing better. In order to be able to do that, you have got to be able to name your cultural values. Those are not necessarily the cultural values that are coming out of a singular person. I would offer they're probably not. You're likely better off if you wind up bringing that collective together. Bring that team together and ask everyone, what are our cultural values? What do we value to be able to ensure that we have a strong, positive culture here, that we're going to get this job done? Once you've named them, you have to recognize what that environment truly looks like in your organization and constantly monitor for it. Is really important then to be able to align the strategy and the operations of the organization with the culture that you've chosen to have. Because when suddenly the pressure is on, and in a extreme environment, be it deployed, be it at home, be it try to figure out how you're going to be able to operate differently under a COVID environment at a depot, those areas that are important for our strategy have to remain aligned with the importance of our culture, or else the culture will wind up disappearing if you're not careful. Because then you have to choose. Then you have to choose, is it the strategy and the operations that we're going to accomplish, or is it the culture that we're going to take care of? So you have got to create cultural values that are in fact aligned with those strategic and operational values that you have for your organization. Once you've done that, now you can continue to do both of those things together no matter how much pressure is put on your team. And in fact, your team's going to be able to perform even better under those pressures. It's an important aspect of understanding that positive culture is not necessarily just letting people out of work early. It's understanding how to create an environment that people want to be engaged at the level that they need to be engaged. They're empowered to be the way that they can be empowered. And empowerment is not abdicating your responsibilities as a leader and just saying, hey, it's yours, good luck, go get it. It's the knowledge at the individual level that you're going to teach me, I'm going to know how to do this, and then you're going to trust me to do this. That's the positive side of this culture that we're trying to create. And now that you've aligned that strategy and those cultures, you have got to over communicate those expectations with people, because you will be shocked at just how little of the communication that you express as a leader is actually retained. You got to say it again and again and again, and you have to mean it, and you have to reward those desired behaviors and correct for those deviances. You created an environment that is actually psychologically safe. You can have candid, very quick, very immediate feedback to people to be able to correct those deviances. And it's safe to do it and powerful. Another way to do that, especially for you as leaders, is to be able to develop your and your team's emotional intelligence and communication skills. Your recognition of, these are my triggers. These are the things that impact me. These are the things that I get really upset about whenever somebody tells me something. Being able to recognize that and to be able to identify those triggers before you respond is a pretty important element. Now you can control that response. And then the second part of emotional intelligence, the ability to be able to recognize the emotional response in other people and be able to manage that based on the communications that you're having with them, the conversations, and the way that you're expressing ideas to them, helps you to be able to get your point across in a way that is positive for that organization. So developing emotional intelligence and communication skills is so critical to being able to create those strong positive cultures. There are tons of success stories out there. And I haven't even scanned through the chat here in a second, but I want you to keep putting them in there. If you've got other success stories that you know about, I want you to put them in here. So Airmen for Life is one huge one. What Chris Clark and his team and the AMXS in particular out there at Aviano was able to do, and the entire MXG was willing to support and make happen, and that entire wing is ultimately the beneficiary of, is something that is investing back in those people. An understanding of how do you measure health of the force. We do health of the fleet all the time. We've got all sorts of statistics to be able to measure the health of our aircraft, the health of our fleet. How do you measure health of the force? Tesseract actually offered you one of those yesterday when they talked about foundations. One method to be able to potentially do that. One that they're helping to get out there and helping to communicate to organizations around the field. Being able to understand the health of that force takes a lot of work. I would offer that it is a key and critical aspect of what it means to be a leader in an organization. Frankly, it fits right into Air Force Instruction 1-2 and the command responsibilities with regard to taking care of people. And it takes a lot of energy and an entire team to be able to do it. But once you've gotten to a place where you can, in fact, measure the health of that force, the health of your team, that'll help you to be able to make further on decisions. You can see on here other success stories. Leadership development course that's taught down at Air University, a fantastic course to be able to deliver you some of the competencies and give you some of the competencies that are available. The workshop 660, which AFIT does, is another one. AFLOS just redid all of AMOC. Within that brand new course, the competency-based training that's in there is leadership-based. We are building leaders that are also aircraft maintenance officers. And that's a really cool transition. And the team that's down there at AFLOS did tremendous work to be able to make that happen. The force development team aligning the efforts at AFLOS as well as other locations like the squadron and group commander courses, the team out at AMOS, the team that's up at AFIT, bringing that collective of the education and training venues that we've got together to be able to develop those competencies of how to build strong leadership potential. Positive psychology classes that are available at your wing. And in my experience, I found were only mandated to those people after they had had a negative event happen, but are available to everyone all the time should you choose to grab them. There are success stories everywhere out there. Success stories that I hope that you are sharing as a part of this low experience that we're all going through here. So what else? What other experiences are you all seeing that are helping to be able to build strong, positive cultures across the organizations that you're a part of? Share them here. Put them in the chat. Share them with each other so that way you can start recognizing, hey, I need some information about this thing over here. How do I find out more about what they're doing over at this location? That's the networking that this environment is offering you, and I really hope you are taking. So let me scan back through the questions here, and we are going to go ahead and take down the slides. Thank you very much. And let's see. Next one. Right. Have there been any lessons learned from our EWE fellows and the industry experience over the years that should be harnessed to improve retention and culture? Yes, there are. That's a fantastic question, JD. Thank you for that one. Some of those experiences, as a matter of fact, what Tesseract brought up with the foundations, that was one that they were able to find, they were able to bring in, and a ton of organizations are starting to use. Just one aspect of that. Some of the different developmental and training and force development aspects that we're putting into our leadership development course, Workshop 660, are also being shared from industry. And our EWE fellows that have gone through that program have helped us to bring some of the very best programs and ideas that come out of these organizations that they're a part of. I think that's one of the things that's so cool about EWE as a whole, is that it gives you a completely different experience for that time that you're a part of it. And after you've been a part of it, you get to bring it back, and we're working on even better ways to be able to capture those experiences and put you in a role that you can have the largest influence across the biggest part of the Air Force that we could possibly reach. And I think that's a really important use of that program. So let's see, next one in here from Captain Lem. Totally agree with constructive feedback under positive culture, but I would add two-way to that. Leaders who are great at cultivating positive cultures encourage and welcome those they lead to also give them constructive feedback. That is spot on. You were absolutely right. And I would offer that that is the very first thing that the commander and the leaders of the organization should be doing, is ask for candid feedback, demand candid feedback of themselves. The leader has to put vulnerability out there first and show that it's okay to be fallible. Show it's okay to be vulnerable. Show it's all right to not know everything. That is a weird idea in the military. We're a meritocracy. You're at the head of the table now. You're supposed to know everything. No, I would offer that if one of the things that I read, I believe this was a Simon Sinek statement, that he said that if you're in an organization, you feel like you know everything, it's probably time to retire. You've got to be willing to put that out there first as the leader of the organization. They will never trust that it's real unless you're willing to do it. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to ask the people that work for you where you are doing things wrong, and be willing and able to accept that and figure out how do I integrate those ideas into my identity, to what it is that I'm doing. With the leaders. So let's see, we've got Jason Noel. I would say was in a negative culture last year. One of the things that stood out to me was that we rarely saw the leadership meeting the commoners. It just felt detached. And how do you have a positive culture if you're not unified? You're right, Jason. That is a hugely important part of figuring out how do you create that type of positive culture environment. You've got to remain connected. Connection is key. In the human experience, I'd say connection is life. This year has been crazy for all of us, without a doubt. And Finding a way to be able to connect with the people that are around you, forcing that into the schedule of extraordinary demands. That prioritizes the team. It prioritizes your expression of value of them individually. So yes, you're absolutely right that type of engagement is really tough to do in this extremely busy job, but very important. So thank you for that, Jason. So let's see. Something I have observed at Delta Tech Ops is their clearly defined managerial versus technical track. This has boosted the experience level amongst AMTs while allowing them to pursue leadership opportunities if desired. Many of the positive culture bullets listed in the slide deck have also been observed at Delta. Do you anticipate the enlisted side of the house pursuing technical versus managerial construct in the future to help with retention levels? That's a really good question. That's one I don't know that I'm informed enough to be able to give you a solid answer on. I do not recognize that as something that the chief CFMs and I are pursuing right now. It may just not be the highest level of priority, and it may be a thought that's on their mind at the moment, and it's really tough to get me to focus on the priority that I've got in front of me as it is. I do not think that that is an intent, a true split between technical versus managerial. I do recognize that that's the way that some of the other services wind up having a track, especially at the senior NCO level. In our expectations, especially with as small a force we are, with the high expectations that we have to be able to perform this incredibly difficult job of sustaining and modernizing these weapon systems, I don't know that we're going to have the end strength to be able to have a truly divided set of tracks on that in the future. But it's a question worth exploring and worth one for me to talk to my CFMs a little bit more about. Let's see, Lieutenant Pangrek has put in Senior Master Sergeant Hammer. Thank you, great stuff. I appreciate the comment, thank you very much. And yes, the Foundations Project is out there, and Senior Master Sergeant Paul Hammer is one of the people that's helping to do it as a part of our test track team, so thanks a ton for bringing that to my attention and to others. Colonel Ike Eisenhower. Ike, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Live and die by the success of the team and its culture you're describing. Harking back to your opening slides on squadron commander fill rates and retention of the force, does your research tell us that there's a sweet spot for how long leadership needs to be in place? That's a good question. To create support and normalize the good culture, what is the life cycle of a cultural implementation? Culture is fragile. But it can also be a rock that everyone knows they can go back to and foundationally take care of themselves in the organization. Leaders, I would say, have an disproportionate impact on that culture. And that's us, that's you. Those are the meetings that you're running, the discussions that you're having, the leadership roles that you are in have an enormous impact on how people feel that culture is continuing to develop. And a sweet spot, the amount of time in a leadership role, that's a difficult one. I have not come across research that's helped me to understand the exact amount of time that it takes. It does take time to turn a culture, because what you are in fact doing is transitioning people's trust in their understanding of their environment. The way things are done around here, blah, 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 would potentially be the culture of that organization. And to shift that in people's minds takes time. It does. And the command roles that we have that are typically 2 years long, sometimes 3 years long, and in a really extreme circumstance, only 1 year long, maybe at a 365, makes it very challenging to be able to shift that culture, which is why it's so important that we teach our entire population this way. And we can't just count on 1 or 2 people to be able to build this. We have to count on the entire leadership team throughout the entire organization that's there. Those that are longer than us, the senior enlisted that are a part of the organizations, the civilians that are a part of organizations, even the contractors that are part of organizations for longer periods of time than a lot of our officers are in command of those organizations or in leadership roles of those organizations are who we really count on to keep that culture going. So no, I haven't found a sweet spot specifically. but it is an important thing to understand that each leader that comes in has a hugely important impact on that. Let's see. So Major Katie Wallace, first termer officers course, Flight Commander's Edge is awesome for CGOs. There's a couple of really good ones. Thank you for putting those in there. That's awesome. Squadron Center Learning through AU is also a phenomenal resource for small group discussions and building trust in teams across the Air Force. Thanks for sharing those, Katie. Those are huge. So if you didn't know about those, if you hadn't heard about those yet yourself, look those things up. Contact the folks down at Air University and start figuring out what resources are out there available to you, including the first term officers course as well as the Flight Commander's Edge. Really good programs. Thank you for sharing those. Let's see. PACE has some great programs to get to know your people. Yes, absolutely they do. Not everyone thinks the same. Need to figure out how they think to know how to interact with their employees. Absolutely, very, very important. And it takes time to be able to recognize how people are thinking and how you're going to engage with those folks. Recognizing the different types of personalities, people's different strengths. How do those things align with the job that they're in and how they're supporting the organization? So those are all really powerful things. So let's see another question here from Senior Master Sergeant Hammer. In your opinion, how do we get more senior leaders bought into something like psychological safety that is so alien in a military environment and to support a grassroots effort for Airmen for Life or foundations? This. You. This environment sharing these types of ideas. Each one of you demanding that this is the type of culture that you want. And holding all of us accountable for developing the skills that it takes to be able to sense those types of cultures in an organization and to help make shift and change in those organizations within our force development construct. Finding ways to be able to provide feedback within organizations to be able to improve those cultures as they're living and as you're experiencing them. Keeping a voice in that type of environment and being able to express to parts of the team that are potentially negative can be very scary and can be very difficult to do. I'd offer that as a part of the conversations that I've had with our senior leaders across the sustainment enterprise, they are absolutely bought into these ideas. We're not going to deliver from the top down, though. This is the plan. We are going to do everything we can to continue to offer every single one of the developmental resources, the resources that they need, the ideas that we can share to be able to improve the competencies that we're building. That part we will continue to do, no doubt about it. But it's programs that come from you, every one of you out there, and figuring out how do you scale those things? How do you share those ideas here in this environment and in other environments and ways of being able to connect across networks to be able to find really powerful practices that help to improve organizations. So as we're coming up on a close here on our time together, and the way that this environment's set up, I have absolutely no idea how many of you even dialed into this session or were a part of this today, but thank you all for being a part of it. This is powerful. Creating strong, positive cultures across our sustainment enterprise is the only way that we are going to wind up creating the most powerful Air Force we possibly can. Negative environments are too short term. You can get a lot done. It's short term, and it's through people and on them. Me, choose positive cultures. I choose to do everything that I can in the remaining time that I've got in the Air Force, every single person that I work with, to figure out how to develop the positive cultures that we need as a service to ensure for that long-term game, that infinite game, to Simon Sinek, and being able to ensure that our people are taken care of, our performance continues to increase, and our ability to be able to retain people continue to get even stronger. So that's the type of work that we have in front of us. And I know we're up to the challenge because of each one of you and those success stories that are on that last slide that we talked about, and the success stories that you're going to continue to bring to everybody else in the future. So Damien and to the team, I think we may be about out of time. And yes, we are out. And thank you all very, very much for dialing in here with us today. Take care.